Okay, so it looks like we are live. This is June 26th of 2015, and this is the Drupal 8 Critical Issues meeting. We have chat on IRC that we'll post after the meeting, and we'll talk about what we were working on and then discuss problems or things that we want to work on together. I have Alex Pott first in my list, so why don't you start, Alex?
Okay, so this week I had a meeting with Catch, Effulgentia, XJM, and we discussed the new criticals. We triaged lots of their comments on the issues. And we basically didn't really downgrade too much. Just got a few things moving. Myself, I'm not really working on any specific critical at the moment, trying to keep the RDBC queue moving as always, and don't have any big issues that are blocking me. So, to the next person.
Okay, next for me is Daniel.
All right, good morning. Yeah, I was working primarily on the path alias issue, which ensures that path aliases are stored with a leading slash. And also the issue which is about fixing the way how we provide lazy services. Yeah, that's it for me. Next one.
Do you have links for them?
Yeah,
you already posted them. Okay.
So with the path alias one, the whole kind of like leading slash issue, is it not kind of indicative of something deeper that's going on with our integration with like Symfony's request? And the reason I asked that, Daniel, is like I remember like a couple of weeks ago I was writing a test and I wanted to like construct the URL out of the request object, and I noticed like if you use like Symfony's way of doing it, with how we've kind of currently configured it, it wouldn't have had a leading slash at the point where the kind of code expected it to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you because if you look at the Symfony request object, there's like the kind of like get path and stuff, and there's methods that add it together. There's a get URI. The wrong request. That's Guzzle's request.
You mean get URI from path?
Yeah. And that adds a load of stuff together. And if you call that on like during a request in Drupal, it doesn't return the correct thing.
Right. Well, the problem is that they don't have an idea that you can install your system in a subdirectory. Well, they have partly, but for example, that function, that doesn't return it because a Symfony base URL is not what we call base URL because it's ridiculous.
Wow. I don't know. I've kind of been looking at this for a year and a half since some of the kind of like generator patches have gone in, and like wondering how we can kind of like normalize like that what they call the base URL with what we call the base URL, and it's I don't know. It concerns me that like the get URI on the request, if you're running in a subdirectory, doesn't return what we expect it to.
Yep. Well, I mean.
And the whole kind of. Oh, sorry.
I mean, the general idea. I mean, for sure, we could somehow manipulate that object that it does exactly what we need, but it feels really wrong to manipulate the incoming request like that.
So, so basically, I don't think there is much room for interpretation here because these are terms that are not defined by us, not invented by us. So I would expect either of us, either Drupal or Symfony, to be doing things wrong. Or is that not a correct understanding of things? Because if so, I would say let's just fix whichever one does it wrong.
Yeah. I think I'm going to try and create an issue around this because it's been annoying me for long enough, and see if I can write it all out on an issue, because maybe then it'll become apparent like what's the way to go. But I know what causes problems for us is the fact that you can kind of set a base URL in settings PHP.
Right,
Okay.
because that's the I mean, I guess you could change your Apache configuration that it actually works as you expect it to work, or like rewrite all your URLs using Apache, I guess, all the incoming ones. But that's something we can't do again. I remember that they had a discussion about that in the Symfony issue queue. Let me find it and then post it as part of the ISC thing. And let's continue first.
Yeah. All right, sorry, a bit of a digression, but to me, it's kind of like indicative of some of the problems we have with like to leading slash or not leading slash, like how we construct the URL from the request.
Yeah, and it's just generally a sign of us using Symfony, but not using exactly the same terminology, and that's sometimes leading to very confusing situations.
To be clear, the problem is not Symfony. The problem is that Symfony, so Symfony is really strict about implementing exactly how HTTP works.
Yep. Yeah, I expect Drupal to be wrong, to be honest.
Probably. I mean, it used to be wrong when we called a link, a URL, or a path exactly the same. It was kind of random already, right?
Yeah. So strict terminology, especially in something as fundamental as this, is really helpful because it avoids a lot of confusion and allows people to build upon things.
Yeah. Cool. Anyway, so I'll create an issue, which might be critical. So we shouldn't be discussing this, I guess. But it's been something that's concerned me for a while, and we can move on. Thanks, Daniel.
Okay, I think Daniel was done.
Yes.
So Francesco.
Yes, I'm basically still working on the 2 open issues on the entity system I was working on last week. That is field item interface methods are only invoked for SQL storage and are inconsistent with hooks, which is, I think, done, but we're waiting for reviews. And Birder or Yshed would be 2 great candidates here. And then I'm working on the node revisions cannot be reverted per translation issue. This one, which shouldn't be that hard to fix in theory, but in practice we are finding some problems with an actual implementation that actually works and also makes everyone satisfied. So the last patch Marcus posted is viable, I think, but it's not ideal from the implementation perspective because we are using field types to hardcode business logic, which is not the recommended way according to Yshed, and I pretty much agree with that. And so I wanted to try a different approach we discussed at length with Marcus and Catch on Monday, which basically does away with the new field types and tries to bake this logic into the storage layer. So I'm hoping to have this done by tonight, and if that works, we should be able to close the issue quite quickly because we have the right people looking at it. And that's all for me. Was my mic open? Yes, it was.
Yeah. Any concerns or comments from people on those, or should we move that to a discussion later?
I think the only point is that right now it's one of the last upgrade path blockers, and if people want to have some discussion around that, it's fine for me. Actually, I had a doubt about how we would provide an upgrade for that issue. So if we have time, that's a welcome discussion.
Yeah, I think we should do that at the end. I just posted on the issue about the upgrade pathway, but let's do that at the end of the call. It would be good to talk about it though.
Okay.
Yeah, let's talk about it at the end then. Okay, Jupiter.
Yeah, I have been involved in rewrite views UI add Ajax trigger, this one, and I was reluctant to make it two-step first, so I suggested that let's explore the first single-step form. How can we make that work? And I think we have a green patch now, and I'll manually test it and then +1 the RTBC. So that's it from me.
Okay. Catch.
Yeah. So I was looking at mostly at the path UI. Well, I found the path UI issue, and then I've been looking at the vision translation critical patch earlier in the week. Yesterday, I was trying to debug the memory leak with the module proxy patch, but didn't get anywhere. But it looks like Daniel and Fabian have this morning, which is great. But it also looks really ugly. So I might have another look at that again today. Not much else. I've been kind of split between issues. Oh yeah, and since the last call, I updated all of the profiling scenarios with a later commit hash, and we did one of the earlier ones. So the performance critical, it would be good at some point to talk about how to define. Well, I think we know what the criteria are to close it, but we need to actually document it and figure out the details so that we can put that on there. So I want to try and get back to that pretty soon, but it needs a bit more of a wider discussion. That's it at the moment.
Is the performance issue you mentioned is the resolve known performance regressions or something else?
There's the identify profiling scenarios, but then that's got a sub issue, which I will link in IRC. So there's identify necessary performance optimizations for common profiling scenarios, and then there's another issue which is called create standardized core profiling scenarios and start tracking metrics for them. And all of the numbers are on the second issue. That's 2497185. So I've got a Google spreadsheet, and there's 4 scenarios, and it's got how to reproduce the exact scenarios. So the idea is that someone can go visit these pages, like log memory peak usage and look at the XH prof report and get the same numbers with the same commit hash, give or take, between machines. So what I'm hoping is someone else will run through those, check that the numbers I've got aren't completely out with their numbers, so that we know that it's reproducible, or that I haven't done something stupid. Either of those is possible. And then this gives us time we can actually track over time against different commit hashes. And then we can, which in turn means that we can look at those and figure out where we want to be by release, either not worse or maybe a bit better on some of them. But getting it verified and figuring out what our actual line should be with some of those is what's remaining on that. And then I think we've got a good way to get the main meta issue closed out, because we'll have something to look at to decide where we are. So both of those in IRC now.
Yay! My Chrome decided to crash in the meantime, so I rejoined. But I will look at the recording for those. Wim.
Yep. So like last week, actually, I've still been working on the vaguest critical that we have, or at least one of the vaguest, the finalized cache context API issue, just basic link. And by now I've gone through most of the child issues, and many of them are fortunately not in the must-haves list. So I'm basically recategorizing all issues as must-haves, as in should be critical on block release, nice-to-haves, as in they probably cannot happen after 8.0 because it's an API change, but they're not that important, so we can defer to 9, or the things that can happen after 8. And in the list of must-haves, there is a bunch of issues that are already critical, so no new criticals there. But I've been investigating as part of this. One of the child issues is this one. The rendered cache metadata created during the main controller request is lost. So basically, any early rendering, any Drupal render calls that happen during the controller, any metadata there is lost because it's doing early rendering, and we don't track or we don't retain that bubbleable metadata. So it's possible to lose cache tags and cache contexts, for example, and that can lead to security issues. So I've been working on getting that one fixed, and that one is now very close. So I'm glad to be able to say that, because that was a very scary one to me. But that one in turn was blocking another critical, which is this one, the link CSRF tokens one. And so I worked on that one yesterday, and together with Fabian, and we came up with an approach that I think can work, but it turned out that we didn't actually solve this issue, because this issue is really about security. But what we did was only solve the cacheability of CSRF tokens. So we found an elegant way to make things links and other things, like, for example, forums, to make them cacheable despite their CSRF tokens, just using the placeholder API that was recently revamped. And so we didn't actually solve this part. And yesterday, together with Daniel and Alex Bronstein, I think we found a possible solution for this that isolates the crappiness, because there is not going to be an elegant way to solve this. Because the URL generation API was not designed with cacheability in mind. So there is going to be some level of hackiness, but we can, with very high probability, very high certainty, actually isolate the crappiness into a separate service that layers on top of the existing URL generator. And that way it won't be a security issue anymore. So both of these are already critical, and we do have in one case, we have a solution ready that is in the final stages of review. In the second case, we have a solution proposed that seems to be generally favored. Daniel, I'd especially like your feedback as well, because you had some initial thoughts as well. But so that then makes the list in the overall meta. So the first one that I linked, so that's this one again. That makes that list more concrete and more final, but there's 4 more issues in there that are listed in the must-haves currently. And 2 of them are Smart Cache and BigPipe, and I'm currently working on digging deeper into the blockers for Smart Cache. And I still need to look at 2 of the remaining failing tests, but I'm pretty sure that they won't require any significant API changes either. So at that point, it is guaranteed that Smart Cache can be finished without further API changes, which would mean that it can go into 8.1, for example. So then definitely Smart Cache can be moved outside of the must-have column, if it shouldn't have been already, of course. And BigPipe, I will try to do a similar investigation early next week. I don't think I will get to that this week, but I'm pretty sure that no further API changes will be necessary for that either. And so then we are left with a list of 2, 4, 6 total must-haves in the last link I just pasted, and 4 of which are already critical. And then there's 2 that I think promote to critical. So I'll paste them now. The first one is bound access should support access result objects. I think Daniel opened this one. So basically in the render API, whenever you specify bound access or in forms, that should actually also work with access result objects. because then if the render system does support that, then the render system can take care of applying the cacheability metadata associated with the access result objects automatically, thus preventing security problems. And the security aspect alone, I think, makes sense to promote this to critical. Do you guys agree or thoughts?
Well, yes, I agree in the sense that it's impossible otherwise for users to know, I mean, for developers to know that they have to specify the cacheability metadata for access checking. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, it's really easy that you just do an if account has permission, and then you forget about it, and then you are screwed.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, when we talked about that during DrupalCon, we said that we should still allow a Boolean value, but in case you do, you basically have an uncached.
Oh, you want to do as part of this issue if there's a Boolean set max h0.
Well, yeah, but that's kind of, yeah, I mean, that's not a lot of code compared to the other changes needed, right?
No, that's not a lot of code either at all, but it's...
I mean, that's the only thing how we prevent the actual security issue.
So I'd thought about doing the same thing, allowing Boolean, but making it uncacheable. The only slight issue with that is sometimes you have code that the only thing it does is hide the element. It doesn't do it conditionally.
Right. Well, how often does it happen? But at the same, so regardless of that, I am concerned that we would just make anything that uses a Boolean uncacheable automatically, because that would mean that a lot of things will become uncacheable. And I wonder if this issue, so the make user.permissions a required cache context, would alleviate those concerns sufficiently, because that is very often the thing that is used to determine parent access.
Okay, so I understand your point that we should first get the API in.
Yep.
But then we need another critical to make it uncacheable, because otherwise we will have security issues.
Well, it'd be either make it uncacheable or say that the user permissions cache context. No.
Okay, fair, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's worth like two separate things, and then we'll figure out. For me, I think probably the user permissions cache context.
So that's sufficient for you.
Yeah, I reckon, because this is information disclosure. It's not access bypass or anything like that.
Yeah.
So you really have to be doing something. It's all. I think what we might end up with an information disclosure for a contrib module that is doing something, or a custom site might have something where it doesn't. But that would be only if it's not using the API. It doesn't feel like it doesn't feel that bad. Like, there's not going to be many cases where you'd actually get this wrong and run into an issue. But we should discuss it and really clearly document what we decide either way.
Yep. Okay. Well, in any case, parent access should support access result objects, and that is critical independently. I think it sounds like we all agree upon. And if so, then I will promote it to critical right after this call. So that one, and then the other one is this one, cacheability support for entity operations. I don't know that one. I don't remember that one very well off the top of my head, but basically, without this, it will be tricky for some things to be correct and to be cached correctly, especially in views. But I'm not sure entirely if it should be critical now that I look at it again.
Well, I mean, I don't understand why we don't just use lazy builders there. But then still it would not have the cacheability metadata needed for it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I thought I was blocking something else, but maybe it's not. I should probably reevaluate that one.
So it used to block one of the fields issues in views, because it also cached the entity operations.
Right.
But now we are rendering them after the cached result, I think.
Okay, so I'll look at this one again. But so in any case, parent access, I'll promote that one to critical. So The end conclusion for now, and it's likely going to be the end conclusion in terms of criticals that are added here, is just that one additional critical for bound access, and that's it. And then we'll be able to finish this critical plus the other ones that are child issues of this large meta, and yeah, we'll get a bit closer to release. So that's all I had.
So Fabian.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, for me, I mainly worked with Wim on the criticals and the criticals that are going to it. I've spent a little time on investigating by the proxies, so suddenly bringing us over the edge. I found that we have quite a severe memory leak in web test base. Even in 80x, it just gets a lot worse with the proxy services, and that's a little strange. One of the things is that we are actually adding more and more MIME type guessers to Symfony over time. So we need to subclass that, add a reset method, and kind of start over for a new test run. Because once a MIME type guesser is a proxy, then we are leaking the whole container builder instance always, and keeping it indefinitely around. So that's one part of it. There's probably some other static somewhere that's kind of a black hole in sucking up all the memory. But yeah, finding those would be good, because it could impact even real sites under certain circumstances. Besides that, I've done a lot of review on criticals overall and checked which ones are ready, RTBC'd some, pushed some back. Yeah. I do think for the prereq replace issue especially, we should take the time, and it shouldn't take long, to really make sure that core is using prereq replace internally correctly, just because we are always saying within core we are setting an example, and if you don't do that, that's, yeah, would be problematic, someone taking a look at the code using the same introducing security.
Okay, but to be fair, I mean, that is not different to Drupal 7 at all, right? So that could be major, like the checking of all the ones.
For sure, but we should really be sure that we don't have any more.
Yeah, no question.
Or like that.
Major doesn't mean that you should not do it.
Yeah. I mean, we could get what is there in and just have a major flop. Would be fine with me. I'm just always, when it's around security and people are like, oh, let's just quickly fix it, I'm a little anxious because usually you forget something and it bites you later, and that's not something we want. That's why I think it's important to be a little more careful when we deal with security issues, even if it might be fixed in PHP 5.5 and removed from PHP 7. Yeah, and probably some others. But yeah, that would be it for me for now.
Okay, so I'm the only one left. I mostly worked on different security issues that have been both privately and publicly reported. One of the things that I spent considerable time on yesterday is this issue, translate user edited configuration permission needs to be marked as sensitive. It's 25.12.46.0, which was a pretty interesting issue to debug. I looked for whether it's a safe markup issue where something may be incorrectly marked as safe. Turns out to be not the case. It's simply the cross-section of the interface translation and the configuration translation system, where we consider interface translation possibly insecure, but not configuration translation. But since they have an intersection, we need to consider both. So there was a patch for that, and it was RTBC earlier today, but I kept discussing that with Peter Valenin earlier, and he had some suggestions for fixing the name of the permission so it's easier to understand what's going on. And it may need to align some behavior with the locale module as well, but once we mark it as sensitive, then we can fix it either way. Either here as a critical or later as a non-critical. And then I continued working on the localized Drupal.org 7 update, and that has a public live testing now. That's an infrastructure prerequisite of the Drupal 8 release. So if you know translators, or if you're a translator listening in on this recording, then we have an announcement at localizeddrupal.org/node/63903 about the testing. And that's it from me. So discussions. Who wants to be first? The reason I ask is that both the last 2 weeks I called Francesco for discussions, because he clearly said both the last 2 weeks when he wanted to discuss, and he clearly said this time as well. So I would have called Francesco, but I want to play favorites.
Yeah, if no one else wants to discuss anything, I will just monopolize the...
Way to go.
Okay, so basically, right now I was chatting with Marcus in IRC, and he was a bit concerned about the 29th limit we now have for the upgrade path. And I think that if we are able to find an agreement, we already almost have a working patch. I think what we are missing currently is fixing the node UI so that only the affected translations are actually reverted, and that requires no UI change at all. So it should be just a few lines, but I think they should be part of the patch, because this way we have the critical issue fixed. I mean, the critical part of the issue is that we may need a complex upgrade path. But actually, Marcus was pointing out that without that issue, it's nearly impossible to migrate to the 8, the 6, and the 7 sites that support multilingual editorial workflows. So I think that's also a good reason to make that issue critical. And anyway, my main concern at the moment with respect to the upgrade path is whether we actually need to support different storages from the SQL for the default SQL one, because I don't think there's really a possibility to reconstruct missing data that we are not storing yet. So that probably means it's not actually a real concern, but if we need to populate the fields that we are going to add in that issue, then we need to figure out whether we need to support multiple storage backends or just the default one. And I think that's a discussion we need to have anyway for any upgrade path issue that touches entity field data. Yeah.
I think we can't, because I mean, it's not only storage, it's also potential behavior.
Yeah.
And even if we would have the API, the behavior internally could be intended to be different. I think also we care about core here. This is a core update path.
Yeah. In fact, my suggestion would be just care about the default SQL storage as we always did, and I think the right thing to do would be for alternative storage backends to provide a parallel upgrade path if they need.
And to be fair, is there any alternative storage out there which actually
maybe not in contrib, maybe in custom space, we don't know. But yeah, I think that anyway, even if we had a completely working and well, probably a stable release wouldn't be possible at this stage, but yes, let's imagine an RC for the Mongo storage. I think the sanest approach would be to ask to require it to provide parallel update functions with respect to the core ones.
Yeah, I think that's fine, at least from my point of view.
Yeah, same thing. I mean, if we find a way that we can make it easier to have cross-storage updates or to prod people that they need or something, that's great. But we've never ever tried to do this before, so like Drupal 7 had the potential for alternative field storage as well, and we did have new ones, and we didn't care about those either. We just got them to free zone stuff, so right. With this issue in particular, whatever we do, we should try to deal with the upgrade path for it in that issue. So even if it goes in after the 29th of June, then it can go in without an upgrade path, and then we can decide in a separate issue, one, whether we're going to do one at all, and two, what it's going to look like. But it shouldn't hold this up. This can just go in either before or after, more or less as it is now.
Yeah, sounds good for me. Anyway, I'm pretty much sure we won't be able to actually provide missing data, because that's actually the point. We have no way to know which translations were affected in every revision. If we did that, then we basically wouldn't need the additional fields. So that's actually missing data. So I think the best we can do is falling back to the current health behavior, which reverts all translations, which is not great, but yeah, we can't do anything else, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's okay. And once, I mean, on real sites, once you add a few updates, you probably aren't going to revert past this point very often anyway.
Yeah, and just to know, do you agree about the minimal UI fix? I mean, to have to be done as part of the critical.
I'd be fine with splitting it off to another issue, but if it's a few lines and we're done, then that's cool.
Well, I mean, sorry, I mean not touching anything on the UI, just making the submit handler of the node revision UI revert only the affected translations. So at least we have something working in core when we have fixed this issue. I think if I remember correctly from the early patches, it should be really a few lines and no more, because basically it's just populating the new revision only with the data coming from the affected translation instead of just cloning the original entity. So it should be quite easy.
Yeah, that sounds like it's probably worth doing, and possibly also good for adding like functional test coverage as well.
Yep. Okay, I think this is more or less all for me. Not sure whether anyone else wants to bring out anything more on this. Yeah, I think the only tiny bit that we left out about the upgrade path and the entity system is whether we want, I don't know, to identify a subset of methods or functions that can be still called in update functions because we think those are safe, or whether we want to stick with the disarmament policies, so no API at all in update functions. I mean, we could leverage this period between between now and when we actually support the upgrade path to identify use cases and understand whether there's no way to fix entity system related issue without leveraging at least a small subset of the API, or whether it's fine to say, guys, don't use the API in update functions. I don't think we have an answer right now. Just wanted to point out the possibility of doing that.
Yeah, should we open a new issue for this maybe? Because this is the sort of thing I think we're going to run into a lot.
Yeah, that's why I posted that in the policy issue.
Yeah.
Maybe I will make it more explicit.
You know, I'm not sure I will comment or completely looked at it. Can you link me to the actual comment? And I'll check.
Well, I think it was it. I had this in mind, but I didn't express it explicitly. So
Okay.
I think it's the last comment on the issue.
I'll find that.
Yeah, more or less explicitly. This one.
Okay, yeah. I think that's worth opening a new issue to try and document it. This is a big thing we don't have at the moment, is like people when they're just working on patches are going to have absolutely no idea what the update should look like.
Yeah.
We haven't had to do it for years. So yeah, I think that's worth like a sub issue somewhere.
Okay.
Go through.
I think that's all for me.
Yeah, who else has stuff to discuss? Let's unblock things that you feel are blocked while we are here.
Well, I think we discussed at length the blocker for that issue with Catch and Marcus, and so basically the only outstanding point is that we are not completely sure the alternative approach I'm suggesting is actually viable because we didn't try to code it. So I will probably do it tonight, and if I can find a way to make it work, I think that's preferable. Otherwise, I think we will have to stick with the current patch, which will make Yshed very sad, and me too, probably. But I think we have no disagreements at this point. I think the situation is pretty clear. We just need to understand whether the right path is viable.
Yay. Anyone else?
I can start with one. So this is the one I wanted to talk about. This is additional uncaught exception thrown while handling exception after services changes. So the general problem is that our error or exception system is really fragile, in the sense if you throw an exception which or if rendering is somehow broken, then this throws an exception which then tries to render itself using the rendering system, which then ends up in a problem. In that example, in case the container is changed or should be changed and it's not yet changed and something breaks. So I'm wondering whether we should get rid of rendering exceptions in a nice way in total. So don't render exceptions in the Drupal style, but rather.
I think that is independently from the rendering system getting in the way. I think that could be sensible. But the reason the rendering system is unable to, or the reason the rendering system is running into this problem, as in during the rendering of a nicely formatted exception message, it breaks because the renderer is using a static variable on the renderer class to be able to persist their collected metadata so far across container rebuilds. So it's specifically designed to support this. And the reason is basically the way that we do the rebuilding of the container, which is during a single request, we swap out the container for a different one. But what we really want is for within a request, the same container to be actually used, and the rebuild container should only actually be used starting with the next request. And that's kind of also the problem we were running into with that one critical I was working on. So,
yeah.
And Fabian has an idea on how to fix that. I think he has a plan to refactor how we rebuild the container to avoid all of those problems, because this is not the only place where that problem manifests itself.
Right. Well, the actual problem is that in case something is broken, and you can't easily get out of that again.
Right.
So, I mean, it could be the vendor, but it could be also something in the theme system which is broken.
Well,
like if your page template is written in the wrong way, let's assume that, then, or some other template which is used to render the exception page, then you also cannot render it.
Oh,
so
you mean that like if they're assume that it's not a problem I just described. Assume that there is literally a bug in the code that is supposed to render it, and then what happens?
I mean, yeah, the general problem is like, in case something bad happens, you need to stop doing something and not try to recover and still pretend that Drupal is working, even if it isn't.
Right. So you're saying if we're failing, let's not pretend to still do something nicer. Let's just fail and give the exact message. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
That would be like a little step towards removing the maintenance rate constant as well. Like just a little one.
Right.
But it would be really nice to stop messing about with this. I nearly said a different word there, but yeah, so sounds good.
Yeah, we had similar discussions on the assert issue, and like about how closely the assert page should resemble Drupal, and I made the same points that basically, whilst handling errors, trying to like fire up the render system is generally a bad idea, and it gets in the way of the developer, which is the point of the message. You know, we're getting in the way of the people who actually need the message. But if a general site user sees an exception, then things have gone wrong already. So we shouldn't be concerned about making it look nice for them. We should be concerned about helping the developer fix it. And the problem with the double exception thing is that it makes it really hard to understand where the failure has occurred, which is the point of the exception. So I'm incredibly plus one of getting rid of the exception handler, and even going further and getting rid of the error handler as well.
Well, I mean, I totally get that we should log the error and the exception.
Yes. I mean, logging is
just the display part of it.
The logging bit is the concerns me. No, not the logging bit, the display bit that concerns me. Yeah, we can get rid of that and just do the logging, which actually has got better in the past couple of weeks. So there's a patch landed that if the database connection is down, it'll try and reconnect, which is kind of cool. So.
And the beautiful thing is that you will actually be able to use a debugger then without having to step through crazy hoops.
Yeah.
So yeah, +1.
So.
Okay, do we have something else to discuss? Imagine you left this meeting and 2 minutes later a problem dawned on you that this really blocks me. And now I don't have time to talk to others about it.
All right, then this is another one, which is arbitrary code execution via trans extension for dynamic trick templates when debug output is on. So the problem is the way how we render the debug output for the trans trick statement allows you to put in arbitrary PHP code, which is, I don't know whether we need to trust authors of trick templates, but we also allow to write trick templates in the UI. So this is kind of a security problem. So Fabian, I was posting a suggestion how to solve it, and I'm wondering what you think about it. So my idea was so what we want to generate there is the used string as well as the used variables. And those used variables could be still
No, I don't even think that's the main problem. I think the main problem was kind of how the quotes work.
Yeah, no question. But like, if you change the way how this data is collected, we don't need to append it like that. I mean, if we just collect the strings which are used, we can render it much nicer.
Okay, if you have an idea how to make that work in game, I can't imagine how it would work.
Well, so
I just know that kind of my patch was quite near, and then they debugged it at DrupalCon, but it was more Laurie and Scott that were debugging it, and I never had a chance to take a real look. And the novice that worked on it never posted their code.
Yeah, that's
it's a little problematic, so it's probably just a matter of just seeing why the test fails and ensuring that we have some kind of quote that works for both cases. So I don't think if your approach works, perfect.
Well, yeah.
It might be as simple as kind of some prereq, some string replacement for ensuring we are correctly escaping the quotes there.
I agree with you. We should take the approach which is the most readable one, because yeah, it's already not easy to understand what's going on there.
My only question on this issue was, like, is it actually critical? Like, given the fact that Twig has to be in debug mode for it to occur, and given the only place where we enter Twig in the UI is the Views UI, which is under something of permission.
Well, it's around the same criticalness as cross-site scripting exposed by Views UI, I would say. Yes, you have to have debug mode on. That's a very limiting factor, and that's why I long pondered about it. But on the other hand, someone does something, it gets synced back to staging where debug mode is on, and then your server gets owned, and like, it's not nice. And it's like, as long as we leave an arbitrary Twig code execution willingly in there and release Drupal 8 with it, there might be some other path that might be able to do something via some other exploit that then suddenly makes this again a big security issue, and that's what I'm mainly afraid of. Not kind of the current entry path, but the later entry path, and that's why I think we should block release on that.
Right, for example, someone manages to save a view via some other bug. Not via the UI, but rather via a post request, which is not. Yeah, for example, like in case REST would support config entities, and then somehow arbitrarily some access is missing there, and then you can execute PHP code.
So, could we just remove this comment? How useful is it?
So remove comment?
Yeah, remove the translation debug. It's adding a comment about the translation, right?
Oh, I see what you mean, yeah.
Like, and we're getting a security problem because we're adding debug information. Like, the other option is just to remove the translation debug markup.
We could remove it for now and then bring it back as a normal task or something like that when it's secure. That's a sensible way to fix a critical, at least.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, let's just remove it and then add a task back in for 8.1 to add in Twig translation debug and reference this security issue so we don't do it exactly the same way. So it has to be tested. Because it seems weird to be having like complex discussions about how to include debug information. Like as long as like the debug information is going to list the template that it's got to, right? So people are going to be able to see that the translation is occurring, and then they can work back from there themselves, right? So this admittedly is helpful, but it's not like the most important thing, right?
I don't know, Gabor, how useful is the output?
Yeah, that.
Yeah, I think it's fine to remove that one for now and introduce it later on.
And there's no other way that we can get the same situation.
Yeah, that would be my other question. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a bit like, do we want to look at the treat templates in the GUI? Do we want to consider also removing that feature and adding it back in until we review? Maybe there's another way to do something like this.
Well, is there any way to have a reduced set of functionality in Trip?
Yes, obviously. I mean, probably even my patch, even though the output is wrong, would still leave 80% of the output we want. It would just be weirdly quoted. So it's mainly apply my patch from the issue, which fixes it, remove it, and later we can apply my patch if we bring it back. And then fix the tests that are testing for that behavior, and that's it. I mean,
Yeah, I agree.
it's not the most complicated issue. The patch already exists. It mainly needs a test besides a manual test, which is a good thing anyway. And then either remove or apply my patch and fix the test output, or remove the test method that checks for the exact output.
All right. Anything else that we should discuss today?
I just wanted to briefly mention, I didn't make it clear earlier, I do have the sense now that we are on our way to have 0 remaining cacheability issues. So I think that is really good. But I wonder, like, if any of you still know of any cacheability issues that maybe aren't tagged as such, or have concerns that haven't been raised yet before, feel free to ping me, and I'll take a look at them and try to help fix them.
Yes, we still need to open the issue for tokens.
Oh boy.
Yep.
Wow, that's super hard,
Also,
given that this could happen at any time.
No, with a vendor context, it's actually not that hard anymore. I mean, once that is in.
Okay, yeah, that's maybe I don't have a lot of experience with tokens, whatever the right term is. Could you maybe file a issue, Fabian, and describe the pitfalls, and then we'll take a look at it together.
Yep, can do.
Thanks.
Okay then. We are over 5 minutes, so if there's nothing else, then let's close it for this week. Thanks everyone for coming. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.